My name is John Overman with Cambridge Systematics. I'll turn it over to Paula Reeves in a minute. But if you see on the screen, if you've been asked to join as a Zoom panelist, please accept that invitation. That just means that you'll have full access to the Zoom controls. It'll be easier for you to mute and unmute. We are opening this up to members of the public as well to listen in. And so we'll talk about what that means as a member of the public. But if you're asked to join as a panelist, that means you're representing a transportation agency or stakeholder group. Please accept that invitation. Next slide. Okay, again, my name is John Overman with Cambridge Systematics. We are the consulting firm helping the Washington State Transportation Commission with this Washington Transportation Plan update. I'll turn it over to Paula Reeves, who's going to go over a couple slides about the commission, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation today.
Thanks, John. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day. I get the honor of introducing the Transportation Commission. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to thank Chair Debbie Young for joining today. I'll just give a quick introduction and we'll get on with the most important part of this, which is hearing from you all. So the Transportation Commission is a 7-member body of citizens, and they're each appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. 3 are from the east side of the mountains and 4 from the west. And the Secretary and Governor's office serve as non-voting members. Next slide. A quick minute on their purpose and role. The Transportation Commission proposes policy and finance recommendations to the governor and the legislature, and that occurs mostly in the form of their annual report that I've got a copy of here, and you can find it on our website. They serve as the state tolling authority. They adopt state highway and bridge tolls and set ferry fares for Washington state ferries. And probably the most important function in my mind, I think, is the provision of a public forum for policy development. They hold 11 meetings across the state each year. And last year we were here in Tri-Cities. That was a great meeting. They conduct special studies, and last but not least, they author the Washington 20-year transportation plan that we call Washington Transportation Plan, or WTP. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So the commission's in the process of updating this plan, and it sets forth the guideposts for transportation decision makers and operating entities at the state, regional, and local levels across all modes. So it's not a state highway plan. It is a vision and strategies for all of us in transportation. And a lot's changed since WTP was last updated in 2018. And this update will support recent policy changes and new priorities that have been set forth by the legislature, like the Climate Commitment Act, the Healthy Environment for All, or HEAL Act, Move Ahead Washington funding package. And the commission recognizes that Washington faces ongoing funding challenges, growing safety needs, and unprecedented growth across the state. Our future relies on strong and sustained collaboration between all levels of government. And that is just a quick introduction to the commission that's leading this update of the plan. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jonathan for, like I said, the most important part, which is the listening session.
Thank you, Paula. Next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, so here's a brief overview of the agenda. We'll do a welcome. I'll provide an overview of the Washington Transportation Plan, just highlighting a few things Paula already mentioned. The bulk of the meeting will be talking about the state planning priorities, the goals, and these new policy pillars. And then hearing mostly from you all on the challenges and opportunities, where you see this region, your prospective constituents in terms of the kind of your transportation needs locally as well as at the state level. We're going to be using Mentimeter polling. So for those in the room, you can use your smartphone. If you're on online, well, here, yeah, I'll go into this in a second. If you're online, we'll show you the Mentimeter code. We'll have time to answer the poll questions and then also have discussion around those poll questions. So some of them will be just a multiple choice, some of them will be short answer, but this is meant to be a listening session where we really want to hear from you. So hopefully those of you in the room and online are active participants in this conversation. We'll wrap up with next steps on the WTP, as well as offer any of you online or in person if you have any agency updates you want to share with this group. We've got colleagues on the phone, and we have a Washington intercity bus plan update as well at the end. Let me know online if you can hear me or can't hear me very well. I can speak louder. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so everyone's pretty used to Zoom by now, but this is a hybrid meeting, so a few details. If you've been asked to become a panelist, please accept that. That'll allow you to see the other participants. It'll allow you to use the Q&A and mute and unmute easier if you want to participate verbally. If not, you can remain as an attendee and then use the Q&A function. So for those in the room, you won't be able to see a lot of the chatter if there is any in the chat. So we'll be highlighting some of the questions that come up, and so we can read those out to the group in here. But please join in as a panelist if you've gotten a request. I do want to do some quick round of introductions, at least in the room, because participant list we can see all of you, but you don't know who we are. So we've already introduced ourselves. Let's go around. Let's start over here. The COG as our host here.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Aaron Breich. I'm the MPO Metropolitan Planning Organization Deputy Director here at the COG.
Joanna Jones, City of Richmond City Council member.
Carlo D'Alessandro, Interim Public Works Director, City of Richmond.
Thank you. Do we want to do introductions on the phone?
Sure.
Okay. Let's do some introductions on the phone as well. So you can add your name by renaming yourself, click on the participant link and add your agency. But I'll just go down the list, and if you're able to unmute and provide an quick introduction, just name and agency, that's great. We'll skip over the project team. Alex Hall.
Hey everyone, my name's Alex Hall. I'm a regional planner here at BF COG.
We've got Andres Gomez.
Yeah, so it's Andres Gomez, Walla Walla Valley MPO.
Then we have Tanner Martin.
Hi, sorry, excuse me. Good afternoon. My name is Tanner Martin, and I am a regional planner at BF COG.
And we have Ashley Arriaga.
Hello, good afternoon. Ashley Arriaga, Director of Transportation for People for People.
We have Chair Debbie Young.
Hello, greetings, Debbie Young, State Transportation Commission.
We have Heidi Ganem.
Hello, Heidi Ganum. I'm with Transpo Group. We're supporting both the intercity bus study that we'll talk about briefly at the end, and we're working with BFT on their long-range transit plan as well.
We have Mike Rizzitiello.
Yeah, Mike Riztello, City Administrator, City of College Place.
And Phil Nugent.
Hi, Phil Nugent, Planning Manager for DOT's South Central Region.
We've got Patrick Hughes.
Yeah, hi, I'm Pat Hughes. I'm the city engineer for the city of Yelm.
Robin Briggs.
Hi, I'm Robin Briggs. I'm a climate advocate.
Welcome. And finally, Tim Barrett.
Hello, Tim Barrett here. I work for WashDOT on the statewide planning team.
Great. So if I skipped over you and you represent an agency or stakeholder group, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. But again, thank you so much for being here. Really excited for this conversation. It's great to be in person here. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the first test. So grab your smartphone if you're in the room, if you're online.
Everybody brought
it's a little easier for you because you can just click a link that's going to be in the chat but you can go to menti.com, enter the code 27634075. This code will be active for the entire meeting, so any question, just keep that browser open, and we'll see those questions there. So again, menti.com 27634075, and I think we'll put that in the chat in a second. If you go to the next slide, there should be a question already loaded up. That is, in 2023, there were roughly 8 million people living in Washington State. How much did it increase since 2000, and what's the expected growth by 2050? So a little pop quiz.
It is definitely an interactive meeting throughout the entire show here. So if you don't join right away, like Jonathan said, you can jump in. This is just a warm up.
Okay, let's see, we've got 8 responses in. Any final question, final responses? Okay, Sarah, let's go to the results. That doesn't look right. There's, if you click on it again. Okay, well, it's showing percentages. Yeah, I've got, which you can see on your screen. There we go. About 5 people said growth of 3 million, 4 people said growth of 1 million. Only 1 person got it right. So it's the middle, it's the Goldilocks. It was about 6 million people in the year 2000, and the expected growth will bring us to about 10 million people. Next question is a tricky one. There are roughly 140,000, 138,000 light-duty battery electric vehicles in the state. How many were there in the year 2010? All right.
Can we get the direct link to the Menti in the chat?
I'll put it in there right now.
Okay, great.
So if you're on the Zoom, I'm going to put this in the chat. Where did my chat go? There we go.
Just a warm up to get you used to using this tool, because we'll be
Okay, so
using it.
this one you got it right. Most of you guessed 79. Again, this is a hard question. These are all very low numbers, but that's the correct answer. There were under 80 light-duty electric vehicles registered in 2010. That just gets you in the kind of frame of mind to think about long-range planning. Like, so much can change. That's just 12, 13 years, and we're gonna be thinking 20 years out today. All right, so next slide, please.
John, just remind folks, for the Menti, we won't be following who enters what information. It's all just for discussion purposes, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, there's no connection between the questions and the respondents, so it's all anonymous. All right, so if you go on to the next slide, Sarah, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the WTP. Paula introduced this. This umbrella icon is not meant to represent that this plan is the most important plan or it covers everything in the state, certainly not. It does show coverage though, right? This is a plan for all jurisdictions, all modes. It's meant to meet the needs of transportation throughout the state. So there are really important regional and local plans. Here's here in this region. There are WashDOT multimodal, or the modal plans that are very important. And those have a lot more detail than the Washington Transportation Plan, which is at a higher level and focused on policy. So some of these other plans have the prioritized projects. You'll have more on system efficiencies and those needs. What we're trying to talk about today is, okay, the vision for the state going forward. What is that 20-year vision? How can it help our local partners with their planning efforts? How can it help the legislature with their funding? So that's what the purpose of the plan is today. And so excited for this conversation. Next slide. What we're doing as the technical team, working with the commission, is to really build on the work that's happened in the past. So if you haven't seen the last WTP, or I should say the current WTP 2040 and beyond, you can take a look at that. But there's a lot of good work that's happened in the past. Hopefully some of you were involved in that effort. But it was 6 years ago. And so this round is a bit delayed because of COVID. And so a lot has changed since that last WTP update. Look at Paula's got the hard copies in the room.
Yeah.
For everyone. We don't expect you to read it right now.
Yeah, flip through if you like.
But what we're kicking off today is really to understand the current priorities. We've done some background research and some background interviews, but I want to hear from you about your challenges and opportunities, priorities, in order to develop the short, medium, and long-term recommendations in the plan. Next slide. So here we are in the early stages. Again, this is the first phase of outreach. The next primary phase will be a year from now when we come back with draft strategies. But between now and then, we're also going to have a round of topic focused meetings to kind of hone in on sort of what we've heard in these meetings, really start to like collate some of those challenges and see how well the kind of current suite of recommendations address those priorities. So expect those later this summer. And then finally, at the end of 2025, when the commission is looking to adopt the plan, there'll be another round of opportunities to provide comment. Next slide. So just to recap the purpose of today, to really inform and engage with you all, to gather input on the policies and hopefully inform some of those strategies as we move forward. So any questions before we get into the meat of the conversation today? Feel free to use the chat or raise your hand if you have any question. Okay. Let's go on to the next section, which is the statewide planning priorities. Next slide. Okay, so if you may be familiar with these 6 statewide transportation system goals. These are codified in statute, first enacted in the year 2000, and they are economic vitality. So how well does the transportation system promote a prosperous economy, preservation, preserve, maintain the life of our assets, in a state of good repair, safety, both for safety and security for all roadway users, mobility, focusing on both the movement of goods and people, environment and health, looking at quality of life, public health, as well as the natural environment, and stewardship, really how well the state is using our limited resources and maintaining the system. So these are the 6 goals. You'll see these in a lot of long-range plans. Probably some of your plans have similar goals. You see it in how WashDOT spends their resources. The legislature has really been focused on safety and preservation as 2 of the most important of the 6 goals. So the plan is not going to do away with these goals, but we are going to think about new ways to reframe them, or a new lens to look at some of the priorities. So on the next slide, we'll start to explain what that means. So as Paula mentioned, there are all these emerging issues, emerging policies in Washington State around funding. We have the Move Ahead Washington Transportation Package, but there's still a gap, especially preservation. So there's options like the road user charge that the commission is looking at. We have a bunch of new policies and priorities around climate and resiliency, the Climate Commitment Act, with changes to the Growth Management Act, and reporting in terms of VMT, vehicle travel, and greenhouse gas emissions. There's equity, the HEAL Act. So these new policies and priorities at the state level that we're hoping to use as kind of a new framework for the Washington Transportation Plan. In the next slide, I show some of those policy pillars. So there's a lot on the screen. We'll show this multiple times, and we will ask you to comment on these in the next couple Mentimeter questions. So see how much you can absorb from this, but we'll also show this on the screen when we're asking questions. So I'll just read these because it's a lot. So these policy pillars, again, are a way to not do away with the goals, but to repackage them. So sustainable funding. So the long-term funding solutions adequately address current and future transportation maintenance and enhancement needs. Climate and resiliency, a future transportation system that is resilient, redundant, and helps to mitigate and lessens the impacts of climate change. Connecting communities, transportation investments, reconnect communities, close gaps in the network, improve access to opportunity, and improve quality of life. Equity and movement, transportation planning supports historically underrepresented communities in planning processes and outcomes. Finally, transportation technology, the state is prepared to adapt to new transportation technology in ways that help further our policy goals, including safety. So these are draft pillars. The language is not set in stone, but these are what we're considering as a new way to look at some of the recommendations in the plan. So we will ask a few questions about these, your feedback on them. Before we do that, I just want to kind of highlight what this means. It's going to use them as a new lens or framing device. So on the next slide, the next couple slides, I show that. Here's an illustrative dot matrix just to show that policy pillars on the left side of the chart can connect with the system goals at the top. Honestly, you could probably fill in the entire chart because you could come up with a strategy that's related to climate and resiliency that touches all of those. Transportation technology does have dots across all of it, but really that doesn't mean that all technology projects are going to support all 6 goals. So this is just kind of an example, which I'll better illustrate on the next slide. But the idea is that there are kind of cross-cutting themes. So here's an example using the previous Washington Transportation Plan, where we have actions and policies in the plan itself. And as I mentioned before, we'll be looking back at the WTP 2040 and trying to understand what's still relevant, what still helps the state address the goals, and then where the gaps are and what needs to change. And so, but in this example, the first action, incentivize the use of clean technology and energy efficiency in the freight sector. That's an action under the environmental health goal. We could fit that under transportation technology. It's very much clean technology focused, but it also addresses multiple goals. Here's one that's a policy in mobility that relates to equity and movement and addresses 4 more goals. So work to ensure that all people have access to their daily needs with dignity and independence, regardless of their ability or income, without discrimination based on race or their identity. So this is just, again, an example of how we can use this kind of new framing device to organize some of the recommendations of the plan. I think the next slide we get into back into the Menti. So get your phone back out. If you're online, you can click the link that's in the chat, or go to menti.com and enter 27634075. Again, it's the same, should be the same quiz as before. So this question is, do these policy pillars generally capture the top transportation priorities in your region? This is just a yes, no, or partially question, and you'll get an opportunity to provide some more feedback on why you answered this way. Okay, so on my screen, I see 7 partially, 8 partially, 5 yes, 1 no. So that's great. We expected to see a lot of partialities, but I'm curious to see in the next question where we ask what should be added or removed. Please especially if you answered yes or no or partially, tell us what's missing from here. So if we go on to the next question, is there anything missing from these policy pillars? What would you add or remove? I'll just note if you do want to remove something, just make that easier to when we're going back through this.
Can you go by number, 1 through whatever, to 5?
You want to go by number? Is that what the question?
Yeah, wouldn't that be easier, just instead of typing the whole entire?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you can answer this multiple times. So, enter in, this is a short answer. So you can enter in text, whether it's one word or it's a paragraph up to 200 characters. But if there's something missing from the list, especially.
Can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Yeah, let's go back to the slide so we can just answer the question for a while. So let us know what's missing. If you do think that something shouldn't belong on here, maybe just make a note that like it kind of removed, because otherwise it's hard to parse that out later on. So, Sarah, let's stay on this slide so people can see it, but everyone who's on the Menti should be able to see the responses that are coming in. So we've got plus freight movement. I'm not sure what remove only means, so maybe we can, someone can clarify that. Emphasize preservation, add pedestrian safety, geographic equity pertaining to investment. So curious if that's sort of statewide or within the region. Equity aspects trumps every other policy with respect to most funding programs. So curious if that's seen as a negative, like that's how state policy works now, or if that's just a comment. Freight, I'm seeing again, traffic congestion on I-5, someone from Western Washington. -2 and 3, so I think that's removed, would be suggesting that 2 and 3 are less important. Number 2 and 3. So let's pause, keep answering these questions. And does anyone want to come online, either in the room or in over the web, and provide any kind of feedback to what you're seeing on the screen? And Sarah, maybe you can see if you can drag the responses into your window. Okay, we can see most of them. So if there are more responses that come in, the responses will be cut off there. Anyone in the room want to comment on what you see up here? Or anything surprise you or not surprise you?
Seeing freight on there does not surprise me.
Yeah, I know when we spoke before, you mentioned all the Amazon, the distribution centers, and is that more of a congestion issue, a safety issue, or both?
I think I would answer yes to both. They're not fully online yet, but it is a anticipated, I'll say it's kind of a anticipated issue we have major industrial pulling at the north part of our community and the east, and that doesn't necessarily correspond with issues being located at those, it's everywhere else.
Anyone from the phones? Someone want to raise your hand or unmute? See, I'm seeing complete streets, and especially in rural areas. There's a lot of nuns or NA, so I'm assuming that means they these policy pillars
John, Mike has his hands up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say my big thing, because I wrote two of them, say geographic equity, making sure that in these rural areas that there's good amounts of investment going into them, where it's just that urban areas prioritized, because we count as well. And then with complete streets, I just want to add a little bit to this. I'm not saying like add complete street stuff in interstates like I-90 or some crazy like that, but like for instance, when I lived in Colfax, you have US 195 that connects several small communities together, and the road is designed mainly for, in my opinion, for freight and vehicles, but because of how the Palouse is, you have a number of bicyclists, pedestrians, and you name it going through there. So I think as some of these like smaller state highways are redone, you also need to be looking at pedestrian modes and bicycle modes. And the one right now it's a highway, but as this area urbanizes, I really think it needs to be looked at is State Route 125 from Walla Walla State Line Road. I know long-term there's plans to change a lot of the intersections to traffic roundabouts, if you will. I definitely think it needs to be looked at because right now that thing is separating a bunch of communities. So those are my 2 cents.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Other thoughts on what you're seeing up here?
Could anyone comment on the number 2 and 3? I see a couple comments on that. Interested in thoughts about that. If you could pop back to the pillars, maybe somebody would share their thoughts about that.
Yeah, the next question gets at, we're gonna ask you to prioritize, which is the most important pillar in your region. So this is not gonna be used to, rank the pillars in any way. We're just curious what the priorities are, and that'll help seed the next conversation when we talk about challenges and opportunities. Yeah, is there, someone said, number 2 and 3 as presumably remove those 2. Does anyone want to comment on that as being less important?
I think there was just too much worry about, things that aren't really pertaining to transportation, to be honest with you. Everybody does need transportation, regardless of what color or background they have. So this is more like just adding information that isn't really needed. You either need to go from A to B, right? Regardless of who you are. And if the bus or the transportation system is there for all of us to use, we will use it regardless of who we are. So I think that's just added language that isn't necessarily necessary to what we're trying to accomplish here. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it.
Yeah, if you make the system work for everyone, then it works for everyone.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter who you are, regardless. If it is there, we will use it. If you talk to us, we will use it. But the top-down approach doesn't really necessarily work. And I think this is just a bunch of words to say, look at us, we're doing stuff, but at the end of the day, when you walk in, when you drive through the streets in the state of Washington, you know that a lot of this stuff doesn't really go, down to that street level, literally. The streets are falling apart. So
yeah,
there's a disconnect, I guess is what I'm saying. A lot of really nice words, but when you drive through the roads, those words really don't help me get from A to B.
Yeah, I think that's been some of the criticism that I've heard about the Washington Transportation Plan is that, sitting up here, right?
Just keep it simple.
And how do you make it more meaningful or more connected to, like what's really important or like actual decisions that are being made. So I think that's the challenge with this plan is that it's not WashDOT's plan, it's not a city plan. So it's how do you get the owner operators, the decision makers who are funding this to kind of buy into it. So I think that's a really good point and something we're gonna kind of wrestle with as we get into those actions, the strategies that, which can be implemented, right? Is there an owner for a particular strategy, or is it just words? So that's gonna be part of the challenge.
To me, it comes simply as just words. Doesn't really tell me anything, doesn't solve anybody's problems. It sounds very good on paper, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, and so these pillars, again, we are gonna, over the next several months, and we'll be looking to develop specific actions and strategies that relate to these. So these are high level, right? We're not gonna give you anything detailed today, and so I appreciate your feedback that, but even those like kind of next level down, how can we make those words actually meaningful and say, okay, this is something that
You
the
don't
average.
need to do anything, really. All you need to do is build the roads and build the right transportation system. You don't need to say anything really at the end of the day.
Okay, so the next question is a chance to provide some more feedback on these pillars, the last policy pillar question. So if you were to rank them from 1 to 5 or 6 if there's another, you should be able to drag on your screen or on your phone and put them in order of importance. If you have a little box in your right corner that says the person has gone to the next question, make sure you click that so that you join this question, you're not stuck on the last question. If you've lost the code, it's menti.com and then 27634075. Yeah. We have some weird captions.
I know, I've seen that too.
All right, we've got 7 responses in so far. We're up to 9. Okay, so I think the screen might be a little behind, but the same message. Sustainable funding showing up first, and then we have connecting communities, climate resiliency, equity and movement, and transportation technology. And this is, I'll just pause for a second. Do you know why we're getting some weird captions up here? On this computer?
They might be enabled on the Zoom account you're using.
Okay.
So you can select down at the bottom, you can select more and then captions, and then you can choose how you want your captions displayed. That could be it. Somebody might have requested it or enabled them too.
It's not.
I'm not seeing the captions anymore.
We see them
screen
now.
share. Oh, just pop back up.
Yeah, Kimberly, do you have a comment while we sort this out?
Yeah, those are enabled in PowerPoint. So if you go into PowerPoint and disable them, they won't turn up anymore. This has happened to us before in running our meetings.
Sarah, do you have some captions going? Okay. I will.
Trying to, yeah. Turn them off. I don't.
So I'll comment here. I think this sustainable funding item we're seeing in the discussion goes to your point, Councilmember Jones, about, it's not making its way down to the actual roads. And I think, that's part of this conversation. Historically, WTP hasn't really taken on the discussion of funding. But we're hearing wherever we go that is a core issue that we have to talk about in this WTP. And hopefully that will result in more action than just good fluffy words that, yeah.
Cheap talk.
Right,
Very easy to do.
yeah.
Paula, I also, we said the wording of it isn't important, but it is. So with the sustainable funding, how it says ultimately about prioritizing preservation, I think something that hits home to this side or this community especially is you're talking about the growth numbers. The next 15 years, we're supposed to have 145,000 people.
Right.
And it's there can be sometimes a disconnect of system being built out on the west side of the state versus not fully built out here.
Right.
And we still have to preserve our roads, but we still also have to allow ourselves to expand how much we're growing and things like that. Not saying we're not taking best practices, but
Can we go back to the slide that shows the policy pillar descriptions, just so we can emphasize that point that he's making there, that our sustainable funding pillar says long-term funding solutions address current and future transportation maintenance and enhancement needs. But you're saying that, and I think the attempt was to capture new connections in the connecting communities discussion, and there's been different interpretations as we've gone around the state and talked about connecting communities, and some more of the rural MP or the rural RTPOs, we got an interpretation of that maybe meaning like alternative routes.
Yeah.
If there is a slide or a fire, having adequate alternative routes to get around that. And so connecting communities turned out to be a really important priority in those parts of the state. And we also heard about connecting communities in the Southwest Washington area, where they really saw it as like their economic, connections to jobs in and around the Portland metro area. So those are some different interpretations we've been getting. They're kind of saying the same thing, but one is about connecting communities for public health, safety, and welfare, like getting around barriers or getting to important services. And one was more of an economic connection. So there's a couple different thoughts on that. But great point about sustainable funding not really being about new connections so much as you might like to see it. Yeah.
And I read the enhancement needs and I took that as, lack of a better word, lip service of saying, we know that this is still gonna happen, but I wanted to draw attention to that.
Yeah, that's maybe not the right word. Not strong enough or clear enough about.
And that could be spelled out, like you were saying, in the next thing that goes down underneath the pillars, just.
Yeah, and we've heard that, and this is maybe getting into the challenges a little bit, but it's really that balance, how do you balance the need for expansion along with maintaining the existing system, because they're both important and in different contexts. Any other comments? Let's go to the results here, but anyone want to weigh in on any of these policy pillars before we move into the challenges and opportunities conversation?
I'm just surprised to see the technology in transportation was actually one of the last ones, knowing how that has made a huge improvement in some other communities around the world. I think that it's just the US overall, we like the shovel type of, activity, and we forget that technology is actually making and lowering costs to a certain degree when it comes to transportation. So it's shocking to see actually that I don't see that as number two. To me, that was number two, a very important component now when it comes to transportation.
I agree. We were surprised to see that in other places too. But then when we start to get into the discussion of opportunities, many of the items that people are bringing up have to do with technology. So it's kind of a contradiction a bit. We'll see how it comes out, if that plays out here. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Carlos, if you were about to, no, okay.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to like see the conversation too much, but I think sustainable funding is, you know, you need funding for everything. And then technology is sort of a tool to kind of get to the goals. And so really like climate, you know, connect communities, however you want to define that, equity, however you want to define that. Those could be kind of priorities that technology and funding, you know, sort of help advance. So that's the way I kind of, because this is very similar to other regions, you know, funding, definitely top, technology last. So that's consistent. It's like where the other things stack up, I think, is where there's differences, the most difference between different parts of the state. Let's turn to challenges and opportunities. So if we go on to the first slide of this section. So this is a very hokey example, but this just shows you how much can change. I could have put this together for transportation and showing you, you know, an old car and a Tesla Cybertruck or something, or autonomous vehicle. But really, you know, so much can change in 20 years. So the old cell phone, and now there are VR headsets, and half of us are in the room here, and half of us are elsewhere. So there's technology is changing our daily lives, and that's a very obvious thing to say. What's not obvious is how much is going to change in the next 20 years. So what is the transportation system going to look like? What is our everyday life going to look like? And how will that impact the transportation system? So we'll ask you to think a little bit about both the near term, like the next 5 years, what are the big challenges, but also if you can put on that futures hat and think about 20 years from now. Because this plan's going to have recommendations for the near term as well as for the long term. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a quick pulse check before we actually get some longer responses from you. So if you go on to Menti again, grab your device, pick one word to describe your feelings about the future of transportation in Washington or your region. And you can pick two, but just how are you feeling about it? So we've got a lot of unease, uncertain, overwhelmed, expensive, so technology, congestion, so some specific transportation related terms, and then you know, one-dimensional. That's interesting. You know, when we've done this elsewhere, there's a balance of hope and uncertainty and being overwhelmed, which I think is where probably most of us are, is some amount of hope for the future, but also recognition that there are big challenges and a lot of uncertainty.
I'm curious about this, if this has to do with the fact that you all are growing so fast right now and already feeling so much pressure in transportation, that we're not seeing more like outright optimism here. Just curious if it's like a reflection of the moment too, just.
I'll speak to one thing, and Alex Hall can probably jump on it as well, is we're doing electric vehicle analysis with the initiative at 2035, all new vehicles are going to have to be zero emission. what does that mean between now and 2035 to get our jurisdictions to the point where we can support that capacity? And how that trickles out of the transportation system into our grid and things to that effect. And the transportation system then becomes entrenched in everything else, and is our grid even at the capacity that we can do that? So there could be a disconnect in that sense.
Yeah, electric vehicles has come up at multiple, decarbonization, electrification has come up at multiple meetings, both as a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge is, as you just stated, with the opportunity being, you've got these batteries that are moving around that could plug back into the grid. So, but yeah, you got lofty goals, but in practice, what does it actually mean and implemented?
It's a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, it is.
And it seems reflected in the comments, you know, the word expensive and uncertain. Can we really meet those goals?
And this part of the state's, I'll say, blessed with how cheap electricity is here, so it's something to move towards. And Richland's done cool stuff with natural gas and stuff
Yeah,
like that too.
the commissioners were so fortunate to hear about all that work when they visited late 2023.
Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so now we want to hear some specifics. So we'll be asking two sets of questions, one about challenges, one about opportunities. We've defined challenges here as external forces or barriers that may prevent the state or your region from reaching the transportation system goals. So here's an example of switching to electric vehicles, reducing gas tax revenue. That's one challenge. Opportunities, which we've started talking a little bit about, external forces, the state could be positioned to act upon. So if the policies or the strategies are in place, you know, what are the opportunities that could benefit the state? So this example, AI technology making it easier to process data, address system deficiencies or you know, safety issues. We've been talking about the state or Washington interchangeably, but you can put on whatever hat you want when you're answering these questions. But you know, to the extent that these are issues or challenges or opportunities that the statewide plan can help address, I'd love to tease some of that out.
And there was a comment in the Q&A, Tri-City metro area is young as compared to other state metro areas, much to develop. Policies are likely to impact our region perhaps more than others. Thank you for sharing that thought.
Yeah. All right, next slide, please. So we did speak with Aaron before these meetings. We spoke to folks over in Yakima as well as throughout the state. But you know, this is not an exhaustive list, nor is it in any order of importance. But some of the issues that we heard before this call related to safety, some of these things that have already come up: funding, maintenance, preservation, freight, and congestion management, population growth, cross-border or cross-river connectivity. So again, definitely want to hear more from you all about where you see as the main issues, both the challenges and opportunities. So next slide. Okay, so in the next 20 years, what do you see as the state's biggest transportation challenges? So go back to your Mentimeter poll and you should have that question. If you joined late, you can go to menti.com and enter code 27634075. And again, if you don't see, if there's a little box in the top right corner that says, please click here to join the participant or to catch up with the group, essentially, please click that box. Okay, so already several on funding. A couple on climate change, So quite a bit on funding and electric vehicle transition. Climate change impacts, population growth, freight movements, so some things that have come up already. So moving beyond, if funding were no issue, what are some of the other challenges that you see?
There's a safety, road safety, alternatives. Funding is the winner here.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think you're starting to get into some of those things, if you have the money, creating and funding networks that are safer for pedestrians, those do not use a vehicle.
Balancing growth and transportation impacts. Oops. Can we see the lower ones?
Not on the PowerPoint version, so I can grab screen if it's.
Okay. It's okay. Maybe someone wants to comment on their answers or what they're seeing up here.
Yeah, I'm curious. So it's something that I think Mike raised, but I'm curious if this group can share a little bit more about the kind of rural highway main streets sort of. I don't really know what the question is, but I know that I've heard that being a challenge where you have a washed out facility coming in. It's the main street. It's important for the region. It's also you have conflict with vehicles and pedestrian general life in the small town. So. Is there an opportunity for a statewide plan to help develop strategies to address those challenges? Is that more of a local issue? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's that it's like a modified complete street. So going back to the issues like between Colfax and Pullman, very windy road and a lot of incidents over there. So as things need to get redone, I would suggest like a bike lane or something where you can bike and peds move safely along it. And then areas where you're retrofitting, if you're going to be moving, I would say bike traffic to other areas, you need to make sure you're maintaining it properly. So one of the things that really gets under my craw, and this is a College Place Walla issue, is that State Route 125, you used to have a shoulder and then the ability to cross 125 on to College Avenue at that intersection. WASDOT took out the crossing over at College Avenue and 125. And if you're a bike or a ped, they want you to go from Old Milton and then on this like little multi-use pathing up on a hill and then connect to College Avenue. The big issue is that WASDOT does not really maintain that thing well. So I get complaints all the time from bike tours where people follow that route. And then in southeastern Washington, you have a ton of goat heads. And no matter what size tire you have, the size of goat heads on that path are pretty ridiculous. And they think it's a city, so we're getting screamed at, but it's a WASDOT trail. So my whole thing is if you're going to convey traffic to somewhere else, maintain it. So making sure you're maintaining whatever you're mitigating for, and then for the rural highways, I would say I know the old idea was not to be allowing like bikes and pedestrians, but I got news for everyone. They're using it anyway, so you might as well figure it out, because when I lived in Colfax, that's the only way you're getting from there to Pullman or Colfax to Palouse. So figuring out how to convey everyone safely, that's the name of the game.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody else want to weigh in on this question about the state's biggest challenges looking forward?
I don't know where it might be captured somewhere else, but one thing that was brought up was just re-looking at the state routes and doing a state route assessment if they need to be transitioned to adding more or transitioning them to jurisdictions ownership. That was something that was brought up.
Yeah, the commission also has a study underway that hasn't been done since the late 1980s, early 90s, the route jurisdiction study. And it's just looking at the state highway system and the criteria that determines what is a state highway and trying to make sure that that process is solid so that if a local jurisdiction or the state does ask the commission to transfer or to recommend transfer to the legislature, that we have a good process in place that everyone agrees to, and it can, you know, it can stand the test of disagreement or, you know. So that's underway, same timing essentially as the WTP.
All right, so let's think about these challenges, and we can kind of carry that forward to opportunities. So I think back to those policy pillars. We've talked a lot about funding, but where do we see the biggest opportunities in the next 20 years?
Can you read that Mentimeter code one more time in case anybody wants to hop in on the positive opportunity? There it is, 27634075. That'll get you this question. You can share your thoughts and about opportunities.
Okay, we've got, ooh, flying cars, just came in.
Why not?
Yeah,
20 years, who knows?
modified helicopters. Technology, as expected, as an opportunity. You know, a couple around rail, so high-speed rail and passenger rail connecting the state. Improve meaningful connections to help reduce the number of cars on the road and increase EV charging stations. So the kind of two-pronged approach to meeting the climate goals. Electric vehicle and pedestrian dedicated lane. I'm curious if that is like micro-mobility or if those are separate things, like an EV lane and a kind of a multi-use path. I've seen some concept plans around slow speed networks where you have like golf cart lanes and other electric scooters and bikes. Personalized propulsion packs. Okay, we're getting futuristic.
One thing that hasn't come up here so far is the partnerships. We heard elsewhere, you know, sort of a recognition that transportation projects are seldomly done by one jurisdiction anymore. It's usually partners, and there's kind of a lot of discussion about new partnerships with school districts and utilities, non-traditional transportation partners, getting involved for funding, a lot of tribal partnerships out there. You know, more common would be like the state and the regional agency or the state and the local agency partnering. There you go, yep.
How many jurisdictions are in the COGS?
17 in ours, well, this is different. Well, I'm gonna say 17, it's easier to say that.
Yeah.
And how much collaboration already happens between like the Tri-Cities? I don't know, Carlo, if you wanna, are you working with your counterparts quite often?
Yeah, I mean, we've partnered on, like active transportation studies or, things like that. We find, a lot of our, like higher priority issues or challenges that we have happen at where we connect to state roads. And those are usually the spots that we try to focus on. Try to make something happen. And it usually doesn't work so great because there's funding for making the improvements that are needed.
We heard a bit about the large warehousing coming in and the partnerships to try to, there was some public-private partnerships, like with the private sector to get, that may be something going on here that.
Richland, especially as the advanced clean energy park that, with almost 1,400 acres of developable land for clean energy use, for carbon neutral and carbon negative industries to come in. And we have sort of a transportation bottleneck with SR 240. And that's the only way out of that area. Besides freight, like rail freight, and there should be focus on making that a really effective highway for transportation of goods. I mean, it's essential for our economy. So.
Here's high-speed ferries on the Columbia. Are there any ferries on the Columbia? No?
I've never seen a ferry. A barge for sure.
Touristic boat, or there's tourism.
Tourist, that's okay. I like that.
Stern wheeler.
What about kind of cross-border with Oregon to the south? Is that far enough away, and the kind of economy down there isn't as important? So are those big issues with like freight commerce with Oregon here?
And for freight, it's kind of a unique situation where I'll say industries position themselves either in the Tri-Cities or just outside on both sides. So Sunnyside and Hermiston, and I think the cities might speak better to it, but when a big employer comes in, the Tri-Cities rival is Hermiston, because we both have cheap electricity and access to the Columbia.
So there is a ongoing competition there.
Yeah, it definitely is.
All right, anyone from the phone want to comment on what you're seeing here, what you put into the Menti poll?
There's a comment, local delivery of state projects. Does anyone want to talk about that? That's a great.
So, I mean, West Richland is delivering a project for the state, on, SR 224. Yeah. They basically said, let us deliver it. We can do it in a faster time period than our state partners can. And we'll do all the other things that are required for all the state approvals and all that stuff. I didn't want to deliver it. And West Richland did, or is. And
it's going well.
Yeah. And if that's an opportunity for other jurisdictions like Richland to deliver what we think are some of our highest priority and most important projects, let's do it.
Yeah.
Come on, we'll do it.
There was a lot of discussion about that this session in the legislature. I wonder if that will carry over to next session too.
Okay, we will give it another minute or so. Anyone on the phone want to chime in?
I think our morning sessions, when everyone's coffeeed up, are more talkative. I see, there's a raised hand.
Yeah, Arvia?
Hello, hi. I'm really sorry. I just joined and so I came in really late and I don't know if this question has been covered, but can you talk more about the opportunities for intercity passenger rail? I believe that one of the corridor ID grants included from, I think possibly from Big Sky, included getting passenger rail back going through Ellensburg and maybe the Tri-Cities over to Montana. Are you familiar with that? And do you see the potential for more rail going east-west? For intercity?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I'm an expert on that. I know that, yeah, I've seen those grants, and I know a lot of the emphasis in Washington State is in the sort of Amtrak Cascades corridor. But I have heard about that as a potential future corridor. I guess I would ask maybe some of the local partners if you, how much buzz that's getting in this region.
We held a meeting, I believe it was in 2020, about passenger rail being extended to Tri-Cities. There's been further discussions about exactly that connecting here to Seattle, but there's been a little bit of a hiccup with the single track and the freight lines. So cars have to wait at the bottom for the other side to clear. And it's, with the different regulations, just putting in line is a lot more difficult than it used to be. But it is an expressed interest within the region.
Yeah, so I think from this plan's perspective, you know, these are the kinds of, you know, priorities we can capture. I know that WashDOT's going to be updating the state rail plan pretty soon, and so that may make its way into that plan. And so we can definitely kind of make note of that. And also, when we're closing out this conversation, the WashDOT intercity bus team is going to be on. I know that's a different mode, but you know, I think there's opportunities to talk about passenger rail in that kind of intercity bus conversation as well.
RV, I'll mention that associated with the WTP, the commission's been tasked with doing a scoping study for a West Coast network plan. And so Jonathan and his team were all working to reach out to both WashDOT and ODOT and also California to talk about the possibility of doing a full study for the West Coast partners. And the commissioners of all three states are meeting in September. And the focus of that, it's down in Fresno, and the focus of that will be rail connectivity. So the rail conversation is taking place, and WashDOT's doing a great deal of work on that too. They'll be present, and you know, hopefully there'll be a West Coast study that brings us all together around a vision for freight, rail, aviation, all of it.
Yeah, thank you. It just seems like a exciting opportunity with so much population growth. Well, they say Puget Sound, but I'm sure Tri-Cities will be part of that too. And it would be nice not to only have to drive, which is really kind of awful. You know, those long hours in the car, it'd be nice to have something else.
Thanks so much for bringing that discussion up.
All right. Any other comments on the challenges or opportunities that were shared?
Speak up, speak up. Maybe we've it's one of those meetings where we're not letting you off the hook with questions throughout, so really appreciate your comments, both through Menti and the discussion.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is definitely the first part of this conversation to kind of talk very high level, right? These are very big and open-ended, and then as we start to kind of coalesce around some of the statewide priorities, and we look at some of the recommendations and the progress that has been made since the last WTP, then it'll become a little bit more tactile next time we talk with specific, maybe not specific recommendations then, but getting more closer to the actual plan recommendations. So raise your hand, jump in if you have any other comments. So just a few more slides and then we can wrap early. So I'll talk about the next steps for the WTP. So we're wrapping up the regional meetings. This is the last, the sixth of 6 meetings. And then, as I mentioned before, we'll have some topic focus meetings later this summer. They're tentatively going to be organized around some of those policy pillars. So climate resiliency, equity. I think funding is going to be a through line throughout all of them is how we're thinking about it. Technology would be one of the meetings. So keep an eye out for those meetings. There'll be statewide conversations, but may have kind of a local host as we've done with these meetings. We'll come back again in early 2025 with actual draft recommendations or draft strategies. So look out for another round of meetings at that point. And then finally, the final strategies will make it into the plan later next year. I'll pause if anyone wants to, if we go to the next slide, if there are any updates from anyone here. Aaron, you've given some updates already, but if anyone wants to share something that you're working on in your community, got a good group of colleagues on the phone, and then we'll kick it over to the WashDOT Intercity Bus team for a couple minutes at the. So do you have anything else you want to share with the group?
Yeah, I can share that we're in the process of updating, or can't say updating, developing our regional bicycle plan. We've done an active transportation plan in the past. We were splitting that into 2 documents, so that's an ongoing effort right now. We're putting out a survey about bike connectivity within the region by the end of the month. We're also updating the bike map. People will know about that more than I can say some of our planning efforts. We're also doing a EV infrastructure analysis that will be coming out later this year. We're in the process of doing a regional system analysis with WashDOT, kind of as a preemptive, identifying where the issues are within our system, and if there are to be future studies done, for example, looking at another river crossing, or where do we want to prioritize at-grade crossings throughout our entire region. So really looking at the choke points and what the next steps will be.
Great, thanks, Aaron.
Any other updates? Anything going on at the city you want to talk about? Yeah, so much, right?
As a city, one of our largest projects that we're moving forward with is our downtown connectivity project, which is on George Washington Way, Jadwin. It's converted to a one-way couplet with active transportation being a large component of the road diet that happens to that one-way couplet. One of the difficulties with that is the fact that it's almost impossible to divorce George Washington Way north-south movements from SR 240 north-south movements, because SR 240 is at capacity at peak, and then people inevitably use George.
Spill over. Yeah.
And so one of the things we're doing with that project is maintaining our level of service for that capacity needed for those movements that are just going through the city, not to the city. And it's been, a little frustrating, but and also we're doing our Safe Routes to School, finishing up our Safe Routes to School study. Yeah, looking forward to watching new active transportation and safety improvements moving forward. Got a lot of them on our list.
All right, anyone from the line?
Heidi, maybe?
All right, well, let's kick it over to the intercity bus team.
Great, thank you. As I said, my name's Heidi Ganoum. I'm with Transpo Group. You have been hearing from one of us or folks with enviro issues through this plan. This is just a quick overview of the project. It's a pretty short project, as you can see from the timeline. So we're going to be, right now, we're just past the kind of initial kickoff, and we're doing that review of related plans and documents. We're going to be starting a bunch of public outreach pretty shortly here. And then during the summer, doing that work of looking at the existing services, who's using them, who has access, where those gaps are. We'll be doing that public engagement, both in person during listening sessions, tabling events. We have a website that we'll be launching soon that will also have some online activities for folks who may not be able to make it to those in-person events. Since we're covering the whole state, we know we can't make it to everybody's community in person. We did just confirm that we will be at the Kennewick Health Fair on June 14th. So that'll be headed over to the Tri-Cities pretty shortly here. And then starting in July and August, we'll really be drafting up that plan so that it's ready for that last round of public comment and then adoption later in the year. If you could go to the next slide. So one of the things we wanted to kind of have these these meetings is just following up and making sure that when we're making decisions about how we're engaging in the different communities across the state, that we are hearing from you all who are the experts in your community about particular groups that we may want to connect with, community-based organizations, events that we should be aware of. If you know virtual versus in-person has worked particularly well, venues that people really show up at that have kind of an extra added value to the planning process. And then we're going to be coming back and asking you for help as well, getting that word out when we do have those events, when we are showing up, to make sure that folks know they have that opportunity to talk about what their needs are, what's working well for them and not working well for them in terms of those intercity bus connections. And it is a bus study. We are looking at intercity bus. We are not looking at rail. I anticipate we will hear plenty about rail as well. And when we do, we'll be capturing all of those public comments and sharing them back so that won't get lost. And then the intention is that final report goes to the legislature in December. So we'll be trying to get this done pretty quickly and asking for lots of your support and expertise as we go along.
All right, thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Okay, so if anyone has anything final to share, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we just really appreciate you all joining today, being active on the Mentimeter, and documenting your thoughts. Looking forward to kind of collecting all those ideas and starting to develop recommendations. If you have any questions, you can email me or Paula or Aaron, and you can forward it along. And then you can go to the commission's website and find out more about upcoming meetings as we post them.
Just a special thank you to Benton Franklin Council of Governments for hosting this and getting regional partners to the table. And just also thank you, Chair Young, for joining this discussion. It's so great that you could be here. If you had any thoughts in closing, I welcome them. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say anything in closing,
Well, I just want to say, it's so wonderful that technology allows us to go around the state and hear all of this input. It was really helpful for me. So I appreciate everyone taking time to participate and share their thoughts so we can have a really robust new plan with this version.
And definitely the, funding needs came through loud and clear, and this idea of making the WTP more accountable and not just lofty goals. Really hear that and want to take steps in that direction. I can't say that it will be perfect, but we definitely want to move in that direction, and funding is front and center. So hopefully we're aligned with you all on that. Please do join us again when we come back for round 2. It'd be wonderful to hear from you. Thanks.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Thanks for taking time.
You guys driving back to Seattle now? Are you guys driving back to Seattle?
I will